My parents gave my sister 25K for a home and told me to figure it out. 5 years later, she showed up outside my home in the middle of a severe storm, shouting, "How is this fair?" While my parents desperately pleaded with me to step in and help her before she lost everything. My parents gave my sister 25K for a home and told me to figure it out. That sentence was still echoing in my head when I saw her headlights fishtail into my driveway 5 years later. Rain hammered the roof like it wanted inside. Wind bent the trees until they screamed. I stood at my front window, coffee untouched, watching my sister stumble out of her car, soaked, mascara streaking down her face as she screamed, "How is this fair?" Behind her, my phone kept vibrating. My parents. Missed call after missed call, voicemails piling up. Their voices cracked with panic, begging me to help her before she lost everything. I remembered the day they handed her $25,000 with proud smiles. I remembered the shrug they gave me. "You'll figure it out." Now she was on my porch, fists pounding my door, while the storm swallowed her words. And for the first time, the imbalance they'd created was standing right in front of me, drenched, desperate and demanding answers I'd already paid for in silence. I was always the reliable one in our family, the quiet child who didn't ask for help, didn't make scenes, didn't need rescuing. My sister was the opposite. Loud, fragile, forever, one bad decision away from a bailout. My parents learned early that saving her made them feel like heroes, while trusting me meant assuming I'd survive without them. When she wanted a house, they found the money. When I needed time, guidance, or even acknowledgement, they offered advice disguised as dismissal. Work harder, be patient, figure it out. I did, because no one else would. I worked 2 jobs while she picked paint colors. I saved while she posted photos. At family dinners, her milestones were celebrated. Mine were noted like footnotes. No one meant to hurt me, which somehow made it worse. Neglect wrapped in good intentions still leaves marks. So I learned to build quietly. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped waiting for fairness to arrive through other people. Every late night, every risk, every lonely win stacked into something solid, something mine. They never noticed the shift. To them, I was still the one who'd be fine. And because I was underestimated for so long, no one saw what I was becoming. Until the night the storm brought my past back to my door. The disrespect was never loud. That was the trick. It came wrapped in smiles and pauses that lingered a second too long. My parents would lower their voices when money came up, as if I weren't sitting right there. My sister would tilt her head, sympathetic, and say things like, "You're lucky you don't have responsibilities like mine." Lucky, I nodded, because correcting her never changed anything. When I bought my place, they asked how much help I'd needed. Not congratulations, help. My father's eyebrow lifted when I said none. My mother laughed softly, like I was exaggerating. At holidays, my sister complained about mortgage stress while sipping wine I'd brought. My parents glanced at me, silently asking me to understand. I always did. There were moments, small, sharp ones, that stayed with me. My sister joking that I'd always been good at scraping by. My mother suggesting I lend my sister money because I was better with discipline. The way conversations stopped when I entered the room, then resumed with a different tone. No one apologized. No one noticed the pattern forming, brick by brick. They assumed I was unaffected because I stayed calm. They mistook my silence for agreement. And every time they did, something in me hardened, not into anger but into clarity. The turning point didn't arrive with a speech or a slammed door. It came quietly on an ordinary afternoon when my mother called to tell me my sister had missed another payment. Her voice carried that familiar expectation, the pause where my name usually filled the gap. I waited. She didn't ask. She assumed. That was the moment I felt something settle, final and steady. I looked around my office, sunlight cutting clean lines across the floor I'd paid for myself. Years of sacrifice were stored in that silence. Every figure it out had led here. I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was finished volunteering for a role I'd never agreed to play. That night, I ran the numbers one last time. Not for her, but for me. I could help. I chose not to. The difference mattered. For the first time, my decision wasn't shaped by guilt or hope for approval. It was shaped by self-respect. I stopped explaining my boundaries. When my parents hinted, I redirected the conversation. When my sister joked about me being the safety net, I let the words fall flat. Slowly, the calls became sharper, more urgent. Their confidence in my availability cracked. By the time the storm arrived, everything had already been decided. I didn't need to prepare a response. I had prepared my life. I didn't plan revenge the way people imagine it. no schemes, no traps. I planned stability. I met with a financial advisor long before anyone thought there was a crisis. I learned how assets are protected, how assistance can quietly turn into obligation, how one signature can bind you to someone else's failure. Knowledge has a way of sharpening decisions. I separated everything: accounts, paper, trails, expectations. I documented conversations, not out of paranoia, but clarity. I made it impossible for anyone to claim confusion later. When my parents spoke in hypotheticals, if something happened, I answered with facts. When my sister joked about moving in temporarily, I responded with silence. I consulted a lawyer once just to understand my exposure. The answer was simple and grounding. I owed nothing. Not legally, not morally. Help given under pressure is still help, and help can become a habit that destroys both sides. So I prepared to say no without raising my voice. I rehearsed calm, not cruelty. I built a life that didn't require validation or applause. By the time the storm clouds gathered, there were no loose ends left for emotion to grab onto. What looked like distance to them was actually structure. What felt like coldness was simply boundaries doing their quiet work. And once boundaries are in place, the storm can rage all at once. It won't move the foundation. I didn't open the door right away. I turned off the porch light first. From the window, I watched my sister realize no one was rushing to save her. The rain soaked through her jacket. Her anger lost its rhythm. The pounding slowed. My phone rang again. I answered calmly. My father spoke fast, like urgency could still bend me. I told him she should contact her bank, her insurer, the people who'd benefited from her choices. I said it evenly without accusation. There was a long pause on the line, the sound of expectations collapsing. When I finally opened the door, I didn't invite her in. I handed her a towel and the number of a local shelter I'd already researched months ago. I explained softly that I couldn't take on her debts or her emergencies. Not tonight, not ever. My voice didn't shake. Hers did. She stared at me like she was waiting for the old version, the one who absorbed discomfort. So others wouldn't have to. He didn't show up. She left soon after, shoulders slumped, the storm swallowing her again. I closed the door and locked it. Inside, the house was quiet. No applause, no confrontation, just the steady sound of rain and the weight of a choice finally honored. The next morning, the calls stopped, and in that silence I felt something rare. Peace earned, not borrowed. The fallout wasn't explosive. It was awkward, drawn out, and revealing. My parents stopped calling for a while, not out of anger, but confusion. They'd built a family dynamic where my compliance was the quiet glue, and once it was gone, they didn't know how to speak to me without reaching for it. When they did call, their voices were careful, like they were learning a new language. My sister told relatives her version first, that I'd changed, that success had made me cold. Some nodded, some went quiet. A few looked closer and started asking questions no one had asked before. Why was she always rescued? Why was I always expected to manage alone? The answers made people uncomfortable. I lost a version of my family that only existed because I kept sacrificing myself to keep it alive. What I gained was harder to name, but heavier in a good way. Self-worth that didn't bend under pressure. A reputation that didn't depend on being useful. This matters because many people confuse kindness with obligation and silence with consent. Because being dependable can turn you invisible. Because fairness isn't something you receive. It's something you enforce. I didn't walk away from my family. I walked toward myself. And sometimes, that's the most honest consequence of all. In the weeks that followed, the storm became a story people told. Softened by distance and revision, I let it. I didn't correct the narrative or defend myself. For the first time, I understood that peace doesn't come from being understood. It comes from being aligned. I slept better. I moved through my days without the low hum of dread that used to follow. Every family call. My parents and I speak now, but differently, slower, with boundaries that don't need explanation. My sister found her own way forward, not because I pushed her, but because there was finally no one left to catch her fall. That was the part I'd been shielding her from, and it turned out to be the only thing she needed. As for me, I kept building, not out of fear, not out of defiance, but out of quiet pride. The future looked steady, intentional, chosen. I don't measure success by who needs me anymore, but by how honestly I live. I once thought revenge had to be sharp to be satisfying. I was wrong. The truest revenge is a life so well structured that chaos can knock all at once and never be let inside.